Well, thanks for coming back. Welcome to RAID Part 2. And in Part 2 here, we're just going to take up right where we stopped on Part 1. And in Part 1, we talked about what RAID is, the acronyms, why we use it, and then we talked about RAID Level 0 and RAID Level 1. Well, now in Part 2, let's look at the Star Trek version of RAID, and this really changed the world when it appeared, and that's RAID Level 5. Now, RAID Level 5 is disk striping, very much like RAID Level 0. However, it's got a little high-tech kick in here, and that is this little term that you see here called with parity. Now, you need a minimum of 3 disks to use this. In the real world, usually a lot more than 3 disks were used, and RAID 5 gives us the strength of both 1 and 0, okay? It gives us fault tolerance, and it lets us stripe our data as well. Let's take a look at how it works, and we'll look at 3 disks, okay? So I've got 3 disks out here, and I need to save a file. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to stripe that file across the disks, but I also want to make sure that if I lose any of these disks, I can get my data back, okay? So here's what happens. I save a part of the file, I stripe it on one disk, I stripe it on the other disk, and then, for the purposes of helping you understand this, and I'll change this up on you in just a second, I put what's called parity information. Now, this is some smoke and mirrors, some magic tricks we use with the binary information of what we're saving. Now, in reality, what we do is we save a little piece of the file and some binary data, a little piece of the file and some binary or parity data, and a little piece of the file and some parity data. Then, let's say we lose this middle disk. We can read the data from this disk, the data from this disk, compare the 2 parity values to see what's missing, and recreate what was ever on this disk. Pretty cool stuff, right? Now, to do that, if you lost a disk, say you lost this middle disk and replaced it, you had to spend the time to go through a disk refresh or a rebuild or whatever you call it. Now, the reason I kind of demonstrated it this way with all the parity over here on one disk is because you always lose one of your disks for the parity for whatever you're storing here, okay? So if you're using 3 disks, you lose 1, that's 33% for parity. If you had 4 disks and lose 1, that's only 25% for parity. So the more disks you have, the more efficiently you're using your disk. But if you take this parity that's actually spread across all the disks, it comes up to 1 disk out of the disk set, all right? But you got the speed of striping your files, and you got the fault tolerance of the parity. But then, just a few years ago, some people started saying, hey, wait a minute, I got a better idea. Let's do RAID 10. You'll also hear this called out there RAID 1 plus 0. All right? And with RAID 1 plus 0, we're basically building a mirror, and we're striping that mirror. Okay? And so you're going to need a minimum of 4 disks here. And keep in mind, you can do this software-based in Windows operating systems, although it's not really advised. Usually you'll do this in a hardware-type situation. There's all kind of companies out there that sell these. You can spend millions of dollars on these various RAID implementations, but you just need to know for the purposes of A+, what these levels are. By the way, if you ever take any Microsoft administrative courses and some other courses, you'll need to know these levels as well. So learn them good here, and you'll never have to study them again, all right? So what do you get here? You get great fault tolerance because your data is mirrored. There's 2 copies of it. And you get great performance because the data is striped. So let's look at what this looks like. I've got 4 disks, and I've got a file, and I write that file, and notice it is striped onto 2 disks, and then that stripe is mirrored onto 2 more. How cool is that? So now I have striping on 2 disks, and then those 2 disks are mirrored on the 2 disks. So I have data fault tolerance, and I have the speed of my writes and my reads, and you're going to hear a lot of people, you can find stuff on the internet now out there, stuff being a Southern technical term for information, about how a lot of administrators and data storage experts are moving to RAID 10 or RAID 1 plus 0 as opposed to 5 because you don't have to go through reconstructing disks and rebuilding and so forth. So there's a big move toward RAID 10, and it's being reflected on the A+ exam. Most people haven't really studied or dealt with RAID 10 a whole lot, so make sure it makes sense to you. If you need to, go out and Google it and do a little bit of reading on it, get comfortable with it. But you will see all 4 of these RAID levels tested on A+ potentially. It's RAID level 0, 1, 5, and then RAID 10 or 1+0. Okay, so that's RAID. Go back and watch part 1, then watch part 2. Watch them a couple of times. Make sure this stuff makes sense to you before you go take the exam.